let's take a look at the situation with Alex Preddy and the state of the situation in Minnesota. So, what happened was tragic. The optics don't look good at all. The public generally doesn't look into these things in depth. They just take whatever they get from the news media or what they get on TikTok or from X. And when you look into the situation a little bit further, there was other videos of him he was spitting in ICE officer's face. He was obviously interfering with federal law enforcement. He was resisting arrest. He was not being peaceful. When you're armed, I can tell you from my own experience, if I'm carrying a gun, I'm a lot more responsible. I'm a lot calmer. I'm a lot more responsible. I sure as heck don't get into arguments with people. When you have, it's similar, or at least it should be, when you're driving. Now, when people get road rage, you see how that ends sometimes. When you have a certain level of responsibility, you have to act responsible and you have to think and act rationally, okay? And Alex Preddy, he was doing a lot of things that were not rational. He was acting emotionally. He was, like I said, spitting at officers, which is assault. It is battery. He was interfering with them. He was coming up to them. When you're, for example, if you're driving down the highway and you see an officer pulling somebody over, okay, you don't stop and get in his way. That's potentially very dangerous, and that's, in the past, there's been shootouts like that where you have an accomplice or whatever, and you actually have people shooting at police and people get killed like this. It's very, very dangerous, actually, for the officer and for somebody that's stupid enough to interfere in that kind of situation. That's why, as an adult with any experience, you don't do things like that. But when you get somebody like Mr. Preddy that's acting emotionally, is not thinking rationally, he's carrying a gun with him and interfering with law enforcement. Very dangerous thing to do, very stupid thing to do. Now, it's his right to carry a gun, but he does not have the right to act irrationally, which is what he is doing. Unfortunately, the way this thing unfolded, and I think it could have been handled better, you got to understand these officers are under a lot of stress. They're being harassed, and what I understand, the gun went off, and they responded to that. Now, there's many cases when officers, they train under high pressure situations like this to not open fire only unless they absolutely have to. So what happened was really tragic, and like I said, I think it could have been handled better. But it's one thing to be here sitting right here in front of a camera saying that. It's another thing to actually be in that situation. You're under a lot of stress. You hear a gun go off. Somebody says gun, 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 gun. They're trained to pull out their gun and train it on somebody, right? And to point it at somebody in a situation like that. So it's really hard to really judge somebody in that situation. Do I think that Mr. Preddy deserved to die? No, I don't think so. Now, he was acting stupid. He was, through his stupidity, asking for it. Something like that could happen. That's why when you carry a gun, you have to be a lot more responsible. So, with that said, okay, what we have in Minnesota and Minneapolis with the Democratic Party, one of the advisors of Tim Walz with the whole Signal chat thing that's going on, we have racketeering. We have a coordinated event to break down law and order, which is really dangerous. Now, Trump has, quote, retreated. He's strategically pulling back for optics reasons. And that's probably the smart thing to do in a case like that. What we don't need is the public to think that ICE is like Gestapo and that all this breakdown law and order and all this stuff that's going on right now to be something that foments throughout all blue cities, and we have a nationwide breakdown order. We already have a problem in this country on the federal level of people not getting in trouble. This has been that way for a long time, and it's been a crescendo actually recently with, for example, the Epstein files, how those aren't totally released, and all the people that are being protected for that. So it's very, very, very dangerous politically. When you have a breakdown of law and order, that's the thing that starts civil wars. And we absolutely don't need that. I don't care what anybody says. The people that push for that are really stupid because it'd be chaos. You're talking about not knowing who somebody is. You know, like the chaos in that situation is unimaginable. Maybe to somebody that's been in a situation like that, but you know, in Syria or say in Ukraine, but you know, for Americans, it'd be absolutely disaster. It'd be the end of our country is what it would be. So we don't need that. We need law and order, and Pam Bondi, unfortunately, is not the right person for the job. But we really need law and order. We need rational thinking. We can't stoop down to the stupidity, to the emotional reactions that are being done in Minneapolis. We cannot stoop down to that level. We have to act above that. We have to think rationally, approach this thing rationally and strategically. We need a more functioning Justice Department too. But Minneapolis will be gotten back to, and there's a lot of accountability to be had there.